something that's really important for men to understand is a proper framework. What I mean is a proper way to understand yourself in creation. Like, why are you here? It's a very existential question. Why are you here? What's your purpose in life? And I don't mean like what's subjective purpose, because that only goes so far. It's not anything measurable. It's something that you can tell yourself so that you feel good, feel like your life is fruitful. But why are you actually here? What greater reason is there? And it's not just to save lives, or it's not to make other people's lives better. Why are you trying to make other lives better? Why are you trying to save lives? What is the purpose? That's a question that's not really addressed in the manosphere very often. Okay, I don't spend a lot of time in the manosphere. I don't spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, but it's not something that I hear coming out in the way that many of the others are talking. It kind of seems, if you were to glean, is that, well, to help men have a better life is the actual reason for doing these things, for creating this kind of content, so that you have a better life, so you don't live in misery. Okay, fine, but why is that important? Because we only have one life is not enough. That's circular. Well, you only have one life, and so you're supposed to make it a good one because you only have one, so make it a good one because it's circular. It goes in a circle. So in this particular video, I want to try to explain those existential questions that are important so that if you can grab onto those, you can understand your proper purpose, the proper mindset to help you function in this purpose for why you were created. All right, so we're going to ask the questions: where did you come from? Where are you going? And what's in between? Those are not inconsequential questions. They aren't petty. They're not just a mental exercise. They're really important. And understanding where you came from, where you're going, and will help you to understand why you're here. So a lot of times, people talk about evolutionary psychology in understanding how to properly execute your mindset, behavior, functions, emotions, all those things in life. Evolutionary psychology. But this is a really interesting term because it assumes that we evolved from sludge, more or less. I mean, it doesn't really matter. If you think that we evolved from something, it doesn't really matter where we evolved from or what we evolved from. It's just kind of here was a problem we ran into, and some part of our biology, or is there a soul? Is it part of the soul that decides to make that thing change? It's almost like if this is your body and your mind and your brain and your soul, there's something else that belongs to you, but it's outside of you that sees that. It's like a rational part of you that sees, hey, this body isn't working very well in this particular obstacle. I'm going to think out and create an adaptation to this particular obstacle. What is that thing? If you believe in evolution, what is that thing? Where is the biology in us or in anything that supposedly evolved? Where is that biological thing or that rational thing, that mind, that part of us? Point to it. Where is that thing that made us evolve from one species to another? There isn't one. So the idea that we evolved, well, this was the situation, and we had to evolve in order to be like this. Our minds, our brains, our psychology had to evolve in order to adapt to this particular situation. That evolution framework introduces an excessive and unnecessary step. We were created to be able to adapt to these situations. It's not evolutionary psychology. It's psychology as we were created. So the evolution approach is lacking an explanation. And it's an unnecessary concept. So the idea is your ancestors evolved from sludge. You're just going to die and go into the dirt, and there's nothing later. Maybe you believe in an afterlife. Whatever you imagine the afterlife is like, if you're trying to imagine an afterlife and say, well, I think this is where I'm going to go, I think this is what happens to us in the afterlife, what is your basis for that belief outside of just simply you would like it to be so, or simply out of it's beyond, or it's something that came from your imagination? If you believe in an afterlife where everybody's in a big party, that's a feel-good answer. You have zero basis for that. It's just simply conjured up in your imagination. There's no scientific explanation for this particular belief about what happens when you die. Many people have these sorts of things. Well, I just think we go to a big waiting room. I think each person goes to what their own concept of heaven is like. Where does that come from? Support your belief. Where is that belief? Where is the origin of that belief? And prove it. Prove that that happens. Point to it. Point to the rationale, the logical thought process as to why you reached that belief system. Or maybe you believe that we just die and go into the dirt and there's nothing later. If that's the case, it means that your life in between your birth and your death is completely meaningless. If you just die and there's no consequence for your behavior here on earth, then life is meaningless. There is no meaning you can give it that has a solid answer, because the word why will defeat anything that you can conjure up. Many people say, well, because we're supposed to be good to each other. Why? Because that's what we're supposed to do. That's a circular argument. Well, because that's what makes society and our world work. It's to not hurt people. Well, why? Why does it matter that it works? Well, because we're supposed to build a healthy society. Why are we supposed to build a healthy society? Because that brings the most joy and fulfillment to others. Well, why is that important? Because building a healthy society minimizes suffering. So what? Why does it matter if people are suffering or not? If they just evolved and will become food for worms, there's no consequence in the end. Why does it matter? You must believe that we go somewhere after we die, that there are consequences for our behavior on earth in order for our behavior on earth to matter. If you can't answer that question why, then it doesn't actually matter what we do. It doesn't matter if your wife divorces you and takes your money and your kids. It doesn't matter if you put a rope around your neck. It doesn't matter if you don't believe that we have to answer for our behavior on earth. If you believe that there are no consequences after we die, then it doesn't matter. But that's not the truth. That's a nihilistic belief system. It's not the truth. We were created for something much bigger than us. He created us with a specific purpose. God created us with a specific purpose. If you believe that the afterlife is something that you just imagined and it feels good or it sounds good, and you're willing to believe that, there's far more evidence logically. Like you have to believe that there is a God. If you want to approach things from a logical perspective, you have to believe that there is a God and that he created us with a specific purpose. It's the intelligent design argument. We will meet him when we die, and we have to account for our behavior in this life. Without that, nothing on earth matters. You will account for your behavior in this life. The reason that our behavior matters on earth is because there are harmful effects to ourselves and to others based on our behavior, or there are really great, fruitful, joyful effects as a result of our beliefs, as a result of our behaviors. So there must be something that has a concept of right and wrong, because that's reflected in how society works, the health of a society. So there must be something that created these things of right and wrong, that created things of fruitfulness and fruitlessness. And so when we will meet him when we die and have to account for our behavior in this life. That's why it matters how every man and woman conduct themselves in life, dating, relationships, and marriage. The biggest reason that men get screwed over by women is they get involved with women who don't believe they will be accountable to something bigger than them after this life. These women think the only consequence is temporary unhappiness until they can find another man who will simp for her, and that she can extract wealth or happiness or whatever out of him. So, of course, you're likely to have problems. You're pairing up with women who don't believe there are any consequences for their behaviors. And no, I'm not talking about the modern tradition of simping. That is not Christianity. What you see in nearly every Christian church regarding marriage is not backed by the 2,000 years of Christian tradition. This stuff you see today is new. It's the product of a revolution. But the old books are still there. They're still available. The patrimony of Christian tradition regarding marriage is still there. It's just been pushed aside by feminism and by simps. But that doesn't make it any less true. I belong to the Roman Catholic Church. There is a 2,000-year intellectual patrimony in the Roman Catholic Church that existed long before this. Intellectual patrimony existed long before the 1960s, long before first wave feminism. Those books still exist. We can still find our intellectual patrimony in support of the patriarchy, in support of man as the head of the household, in support of not simping. But you will not find this at your local church because they too have been indoctrinated in these new books, these new concepts, the new feminist understanding of Christianity, this feminist distortion of Christianity. But there is this intellectual patrimony. So answering that question, where did we come from and where are we going, helps us to know why we're here. So we were created by God. I was created by God. You were created by God. Everybody was created by God. Okay? And the goal is to meet him in heaven one day. But he's not a legalistic type God. He is a relational type God. It's not like a warm and fuzzy sort of relational thing, but he's not a tyrant. But also, if you want to meet him at his house, you have to have a relationship with him. If you want to go to the Super Bowl party, you got to get to know the homeowner. And you don't get to go to the Super Bowl party just because you exist. That would be simping on God's part for you. Like, oh, well, I'll just let you in just because I created you, but you weren't really interested in having a relationship with me. But I'll let you in anyway. Why would you let somebody into your own home that you don't know, just some stranger who shows up at the door? Why would you do that? You have a Super Bowl party, you have a bunch of people over, and then a guy shows up, and you start asking people, hey, do you know who that is? Do you know do you know that guy? Do you know that guy? Nobody knows him, so you're going up to that guy and you go, hey, can I help you with something? You know that he's in the wrong place, that he doesn't belong because he doesn't have a relationship with anybody else at that party. He's a stranger. So why would God let you in if you don't have a relationship with him? If you don't have a relationship with his people, with an interest of getting to know him? Why would you do that? Why would he let you in? Why should he let you in if you were a stranger to him? It's a relationship. It's not transactional. It's a relationship. But if you're not interested in the relationship, he allows you to walk away from the relationship. He doesn't make you participate in it. But if you want to be in a relationship with somebody, you conduct yourself in a certain way. You interact with them. You get to know them. You have an interest in taking care of them. In participating, spending time with that person. So one day, there will be consequences for your behavior, how you conducted yourself. But that doesn't mean that while you're here on earth, you just do whatever you want to do. And, well, you know, I'm generally a good person. I don't murder anybody. I don't intentionally treat people badly. I don't cheat on my taxes. I'm a pretty good guy. But that's not enough. Like, you have a real purpose. He has a purpose for you. He wants to have a relationship with everybody on earth. He's not going to simp for it. He's not going to beg people for it. But our job is to take care of people in our tribe, your family, your close friends, your close neighbors. It's not everybody in the world. This is not globalism is not a Christian concept. The globalistic definition or interpretation of the word neighbor is a heresy. It's just flat out wrong. It's not truth. If everyone is your neighbor, then nobody is your neighbor. But God wants to have a relationship with everybody. He recognizes that that's not actually going to happen because most people are going to reject him. So we can't simp and just fall apart, because he'd be a pretty pathetic God. Oh, I created all of these people, these 7 billion, 10 billion people. Oh my gosh, but they all went astray and I don't know what to do. It's like, that would be a pathetic God. That's not actually God. But he's interested in the people that are open to truth, that are open to having a relationship with him. And also, this world is something that he created. And it thrives. People are pointed to God by establishing order in this world. That's why in the Middle Ages, they would do things. They would create bridges. They would create buildings, homes. They created them to be beautiful. They created beautiful works of art. Truth, beauty, and goodness are the three transcendentals that lead people to God just by simply experiencing them. I hear a beautiful piece of music, and that makes me think of things that are higher than myself, or makes me feel this ascent in my being, that there's something greater than me. I see these beautiful cathedrals. We're going to think about building a cathedral, and it's going to take us 200 years to do it. We won't even get to enjoy the fruits of our labor, but someone will one day. And we're doing this to honor God and create these beautiful cathedrals and point people to God, that there is something bigger than us. And it's important to establish that hierarchy and that order in life, because it makes life more fulfilling and it brings glory to God. There is a hierarchy in the relationship between God and man, and God is at the top of that hierarchy and man is at the bottom. And in the same way, our marriages are there to reflect man's relationship with God, except man is the head of that relationship and wife is at the bottom of that hierarchy, that two-person hierarchy. This is how God created it. So you understand as a man that your job is to create order in this world. That your work, when you leave home every day, is designed, or ought to be designed, around trying to bring order to the world. It's done so if you're an attorney, you're trying to bring order. You're trying to bring justice, to make a fair trial for your client or for the company that you work for. You're trying to help establish and balance out best interests so that nobody is taken advantage of. So the people that you're working for aren't taken advantage of. And then there are attorneys on the other side for the other companies or for the government who are also trying to balance out that you aren't able to take advantage of other people to their detriment. If you're a landscaper, you're working to keep order in the landscape, in the areas in which you're working. You're keeping the grass from crawling up over the sidewalk. There are many things in life in which you're trying to keep order. And also, your job is to be... You're essentially supposed to bring Christ, bring goodness to the people around you. You have a relationship with God that shines in you, and you're able to be that person around others, that you bring other people up. And when they say, hey, how come you're always so optimistic? How come you live your life this way? What is it about you? I don't understand. What is it about you that you seem unfazed by all these different things? That you seem to have it all together. And you say, look, I have a relationship with God, and that's greater than pretty much everything that looks scary in the world. War doesn't really bother me, because I know that even if I'm harmed or my family is, or God forbid I pass away, that's not the worst thing that can happen to me. There's life after that. And because God's house is what comes after this, and I've worked on establishing a relationship with God on a daily basis and trying to have a relationship with God, I am hopeful that I get to go hang out at his house after this life is over, because I built a relationship with him. I give him love because he first loved me. I show him love. And yeah, he's God and I'm this tiny little man, so my act of love is really puny for him, but it's a big deal for me. He recognizes, because he built me, he recognizes that, hey, you put in this effort every day to show me some love. I appreciate it. It's a tiny deal to me, but it's a big deal to you. And I appreciate it. You gave in that relationship. It's a two-way relationship. So God sees that I'm giving in that relationship, and he's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. You made a lot of mistakes in your life, and you continued in trying to have that relationship and to do better. Good for you. Like a loving father is supposed to do, not like a punitive father is supposed to do, like a loving father does. So whatever job you work in, you're supposed to be in that relationship with God. It's supposed to reflect out to the other people that you're working around, no matter what kind of work that you do. It's supposed to be reflected to those people and also lead them to a relationship with God. So at the end of the day, they're able to go to his house and be part of the Super Bowl party too. And I'm not trying to trivialize this. It's just an analogy to try and help wrap your mind around the concept. And that relationship with God brings order to my life. If you're trying to live a life that's pleasing to God, it brings order to your life. It brings order to your kids' lives. It brings order to the lives of all the people that are trying to participate in a relationship with God. If they're really, truly trying to do what God wants for them, to do what God has for them, to live a life that is pleasing to God, it brings order to their lives. That is why we exist. That's why we were born. And after we live this life on earth, if we have that good relationship with God, if we're trying to have a good, loving relationship with God and live a life that's pleasing to him, we end up in heaven. So the worst thing that happens to you is not that you die on earth. The worst thing that could happen to you is that you end up in hell forever. And the primary pain of hell is the regret of having passed up that relationship with God, that you knew that it was so close. You could have just done these things, not check these boxes. You could have had a relationship with God and you wouldn't have to live like this forever. But it's for 20 years, and then another 20, and then another 20, and then another 20, and another 20, forever, that you're not in heaven with God, and that you feel the pain of the regret of missing that opportunity. Because you decided to live a life that was pleasing for you rather than a life that is pleasing to God. And like I said, nowhere in this does it require you to be a simp, contrary to the white pill advocates and all the guys running around in pink polo shirts like they did, the Promise Keepers back in the 90s. Guys with the beer bellies and oh my gosh, it was hideous. That was our role model for masculinity in the 90s, was the Promise Keepers. This is not a good look. God, the 90s were so bad. Anyhow, you have to know where you're coming from and where you're going in order to know what is your purpose here on earth. So that's the answer to the question. I answered that question. I answered all three of those questions. Recently, I listened to a podcast, and I heard this author talking, and I went, hey, I've read this book several times. This is a pretty good book. And I listened to what he had to say in this interview, and it was actually quite disappointing. It was it was shocking, okay? I'm going to try to obfuscate some of these details because I don't like being the guy that calls out people by name, because I'm a little guy, and calling out people that are much bigger than me, that have a bigger platform, that have a bigger table, it just seems like a cheap shot. So I'm going to try and obfuscate these details in order to hide the identity of this person. And this guy makes a bunch of money, and he moves to a poorer area of town. And he has a big house, and he meets a woman. And this guy's been married and divorced twice, okay? And she's single, and she's living in a much poorer area of town. She's living, you could say she's below the poverty line. So this guy he's pretty wealthy, and he's feeling guilty about having her go on dates with him, and then he just takes her home to the poor area of town. I think it was like Detroit or something. And he drops her off. He's like, God, this is awful. We go on this date. It's a great time. And then I just drop her off at this, and then I go back to my big mansion. So he eventually asks her, will you come and live with me? Because I feel bad about dropping you off in your awful falling down home. So she moves in. Well, this guy tells a story about basically every once in a while her crazy would come out. She had a tendency to erupt. And he explains in the podcast that this woman, this girlfriend, I think they married, she managed to convince him that she would be bored in the relationship if her crazy didn't come out from time to time. Now, I'm on the outside of this relationship, knowing little about it except what he said in this podcast, and I'm looking in. But what it looks to me is the poor woman, the woman with no money, who made some really bad choices in life and just didn't ever get really off of her feet. She gets picked up by the rich guy. She doesn't adjust her behavior to get rid of the emotional explosions. She convinces him that he would be bored without the explosions. Now, I went to graduate school for a master's degree in counseling, and they explained that pathology attracts pathology, or in layman's terms, crazy attracts crazy. So if you are in a relationship with somebody who has the crazy coming out, then there's something crazy about you that isn't okay with the peace. There's part of you that needs the crazy, and that's not like a good romantic sort of thing. The basic problem with this, you'd be bored without the crazy, is that if you understood the purpose of your creation as a man, and you're living that in your day-to-day life, there's no place in your life for the crazy. Your marriage is not where you're supposed to be having the biggest battles. Out in the world, in interacting with other people, in trying to bring order to the world, in trying to be a light of Christ to other people, that's where you're going to experience the conflict, the biggest battles. You're supposed to be coming home to your wife who is bringing you peace. This is scriptural. 1 Peter chapter 3, it talks about, do you want to convert your husband? Do you want to be a good benefit to your husband? Be the picture of gentleness and tranquility, of purity and of reverence toward him. Don't put your value in how you look, in the bangles that you put in your hair, in the jewelry that you have, in your beauty. Put it in your internal comportment, in how you present yourself on an emotional level, bringing peace to your husband. The book of Esther, same sort of thing. She was married to a guy she absolutely hated, because the guy she was married to was a king. He says, I'm going to marry you. She's going, no, I don't want to, but she marries him anyways. And Esther was that shining example of being the peaceful wife who brought peace to her husband, because he had 1,000,000,001 other things to do as the king, that coming home to a wife who caused him problems, that's why he got rid of the first one. He kicked her out of the palace. And then he wrote a declaration to the entire kingdom saying, it is illegal for women to disrespect their husbands. It's not okay to do this. And so your biggest battles are not supposed to be at home. They're supposed to be out in the world while you're trying to establish order. The fact that this woman was rescued from squalor and thinks that she can go off on her husband is quite shocking. She could never provide that life for herself, yet she can bring out the crazy. And the fact that he even tolerated that says something about his self-concept. Why did he think that that was okay? If there's a part of him that has real trouble in a peaceful relationship, where they sit down like two emotionally mature individuals and calmly discuss their problems, then he has some work to do. Why is peace something to be avoided? Why is it boring? A man's work should have enough conflict and challenge on a daily basis, or maybe just a weekly basis, that he comes home looking for a retreat. He shouldn't need that conflict at home to keep it interesting. Your biggest battles, if you understand the purpose of your creation, are to bring order to the world, eliminating chaos and dysfunction. Your wife is supposed to make the home a retreat. So when you come home from the battles of trying to establish order, she's there to help you recover and recharge. She's not there to make herself a burden on you. Why would you even get married then? Many young men are realizing that their peace is more important than having a woman around. Much of this is due to spending their entire childhoods raised by women. I don't think another woman is the solution we need, as Tyler Durden famously said. It's true. Even in nuclear families, the dad is often weak and submissive to mom's will and emotions. These MGTOW men only experience feminism. It's difficult to find a good woman. They exist, but it's difficult to find them. It really is. To find one who treats herself with respect and treats others with respect without malice, without having to be dominant or aggressive, is a difficult thing to find. And many times these women take a transactional approach to it. I will treat you with respect after you treat me with respect. That's a lack of personal integrity. Personal integrity says, I will treat you with respect because that is the standard that I hold for myself. Even if you treat me badly, I am not going to treat you badly because that's what I hold myself to. That's important to me as a person, to treat others with respect, without malice, without having to be dominant or aggressive. That's integrity. A transactional mindset with regard to respect. You treat me with respect first, and then I'll treat you with respect. That is a lack of integrity. A person with that mindset does not believe that it's important for them to be respectful on their own. They believe that respect is a thing to be paid in return for respect first. But they lack the personal integrity and accountability to say, I want to treat others with respect because it is right and good, and it is pleasing to God. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a fantastic day.